So welcome everyone, and let me just give you a little bit of context before we jump into kind of what I put together today for a presentation. First, let me start out by saying this has been an absolutely insane time for me. We're in the middle of the unknown, and that's what I wanted to talk about, is how to deal with the unknown. And how this works for me as an instructor is I go out, I have a question, I go out, figure out things about it, and then organize it into a presentation. So that's what I ended up doing. It's like a bad habit. And so I want to talk about uncertainty today. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Oops. And let me get it into present. Oops, I don't want it on mine. Okay, there we go. So in terms of who I am, I'm an associate professor in the School of Social Work here at HPU, and my area of social work practice has been primarily in the clinical area, working with trauma, usually kids with trauma. And so the area that I've been interested in, and I'm pulling in from here, is work around crisis, counseling, disaster, and that work on trauma. And so today I wanted to talk about three aspects of the situation that we're facing right now that I've found to be very troubling, and troubling for my sanity. And so I'm projecting a little bit and wondering if it's troubling for yours. And it's primarily affecting our mental and physical health. Certainly the biggest threat to our physical health right now is, of course, COVID-19, the virus itself. But I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not in healthcare. That's not my area of expertise. I want to talk about the other side of it, which is the mental health part, which is us dealing with the situation we're in right now. So there are three parts of how of the situation that we're dealing with that, like I said, I see as problematic. And that's this issue of uncertainty. So being in the presence of uncertainty, being in a state of persistent and chronic stress, and let me tell you, I am there, and then the effects of social isolation. So how I'm going to organize this is around a half hour of me talking, a few things in between to pull you all in. And I want to give you some of the scientific background around this uncertainty, stress, and social isolation, and then talk about strategies to deal with those three factors. So let's get in and talk about that issue of uncertainty first. So I hope everyone agrees that the times right now are uncertain. And guess what? We humans hate uncertainty. If we don't know what's around the corner, we don't know how to protect ourselves and feel safe. How are we going to stay out of harm's way if we don't know what's coming at us? Our minds are used to predicting things and problem solving based on predicting. So because of our need to do that, predict danger, our minds typically assume the worst. Our minds typically over-personalize threats, and our minds jump to conclusion. Your brain will do almost anything to reach certainty in times of uncertainty. So we're hardwired to overestimate threats and underestimate our ability to handle them. And that's all in the name of survival. So just to make it clear here, this slide that I put it, we're the cavemen in here. We're ready to knock out uncertainty in order for us to survive. And the human mind is automatically attracted to the worst case scenario. So catastrophizing is an evolutionary adaptation, but the problem is that it's usually unrealistically negative. When we are faced with uncertainty, our minds imagine various bad outcomes down the road, and those imaginations help us do planning for uncertainty. However, sometimes the brain prefers to know an outcome one way or another just to take the edge off, even if it's a bad outcome. So let me talk a little bit about the science around that. Studies show that you are calmer anticipating pain than experiencing the pain itself. So let me translate that to right now. So job uncertainty, for example, not knowing if your job is stable, if it's going to be there, if you're going to be let go. Research has shown that in those situations, people are less stressed actually losing the job than being in that place of uncertainty. Also, British researchers did a study about 10 years ago looking at certainty around pain. So I don't know what the big deal in psychology is with electrical shock, but the experiment involved people anticipating getting a shock, so they knew they had a 50% chance of getting one, versus actually getting one. And the stress level was higher in that anticipation stage. So people would rather receive the shock, have it over with, than wait for something that might be happening. And that's because we resist uncertainty. We don't like it. The other mistake that our minds make that I want to talk about with this science piece and uncertainty is that in an effort to survive, we employ this concept called impact bias. And that's where we tend to overestimate how much bad events are going to impact us and how long that impact is going to last. We overestimate those. And relatedly, we downplay our ability to handle those events. Maybe that's in an effort to, if we overreact, it's going to kick us into gear to do something evolutionarily wise. But no matter what, that is a problem for us. We've all weathered scary events. We've all weathered tremendous adversity. Typically, humans are very good at adaptation, but in the face of uncertainty, we're basically afraid of that. This level of uncertainty then leads us to this next area that concerns me, which is this idea of persistent stress. So when certainty is questioned, our stress responses go haywire. They try to get us to react, trying to get us to that safe place again. That's our natural response to stress. You've heard of this referred to as fight or flight. And I feel stress right now, and not just a little. Like normally when I prep for a presentation, I feel stress. It's this, I can feel it kicking in. It's this level of stress I feel. Now, even when I'm supposedly feeling okay, I feel revved up. It's like my new normal is at 20 miles per hour rather than at rest. And that's one of the problems for me. So I have a poll here I want to deploy. And the problem now is I can't see it because I'm in presentation mode. Can you see it? To do number one. So I have a few polls in here. They're anonymous, so don't worry about it. And what I want you to do here, this is number 4, pull it back down. Yeah, it says number 4. I don't know why. So let's go down. Question 4, delete this one. Let's end that. And pull up. I want the stress level. Rate your stress level just 1 month ago. And let me set the context for you. So I'm going to ask you to rate your stress level 1 to 10. I want you to go back to a month and a half ago. So to help you there, this is before everything really got local for us, that we knew this virus was out there, but it was not really in the United States as much. This is before you all went off on spring break. You were still making plans for spring break. And this was not directly impacting most of our lives. So what I want you to do is, if we can get the poll up, do you see it? Yeah, still the wrong one. I wonder why. Let's see.
So which question are you seeing?
I am seeing question number 4, which is thinking about the last 2 weeks. How much of the following effects have you noticed?
Okay.
And then it has that list.
Right. So
if you scroll down, there's another question right below it.
We're trying the new polling thing just because it's a feature in here, and it's
for some reason it looks like, even though I typed them in order, question number 2 is actually supposed to be question number 1. I don't know why.
Right.
It's question number 4 in progress.
So will it let you jump down to the next question?
No.
Okay. And that's okay. We don't have to use that polling feature.
Let somebody answer.
Oh, interesting, because it's not, I don't even see it.
I can see
I just
the poll. I
closed
can see
it.
There we
the
go.
poll if you scroll down.
Yeah, there we go.
Second question. I can see it, or I did see it. It's gone now.
Well, okay, so I just relaunched it.
Right, so scroll down, there we go. So it's listed as question number 2. So people see it on my screen. I don't know if you can enter then, everybody. So it's this idea of being able to rate your stress level 1.5 months ago, right then, what you were at. 1 is super low stress, chill. 10 is as stressed as you've ever been in your life. And so it gives you a few minutes to do that. I wonder if I can rate. So then are you able to show the results or not? Because I can't see the results now that it comes from somewhere else.
So I think when we end it, I can.
Okay.
So at the point you want me to end this one, I should be able to share the results and then relaunch it for the next question.
Okay. So everyone had a chance, hopefully, just to do the rating of 1.5 months ago. So apparently that's question 2 in there. Why don't you go ahead and end that one?
Okay.
And it's supposed to let you display. So scrolling down again, I see nothing. Do you see something display?
No.
Okay.
First time, I didn't the second time.
So let's move on. That's part of let's talk about the stress of technology. Someone else can do a presentation on that. Wouldn't that be fabulous right now? The idea being that then going back right now, so you have 1.5 months ago, moving ahead right now, and kind of that follow-up and seeing if you were talking about today, what your stress level would be. For me, that's that distance, that revved up all the time piece. I feel like I have that my new normal is like at that 2-3 level, that I never get back down to 0 or 1. So let's talk a bit about what we know about persistent and chronic stress. We know that stress has physical and psychological effects. It's a great example of the connection between mind and body that I'm going to get at a little bit more when we talk about strategies. Our physical responses to stress can be things like increased heart rate, sleeplessness, hyperarousal, which is that feeling on guard all the time, low energy, headaches. The psychological responses, though, largely depend on how your mind wraps around the stressful event. So your mind tries to figure out and how much control and how many options you have in the event. And based on that, that's your psychological response. So right there, you can see a problem, because right now it's hard for us to find control in the current events. Persistent stress is no joke. Being in the state of hyperarousal for prolonged periods of time has actually been shown to alter our brain structure. Some studies suggest the brains of animals under chronic stress look very much like the brains of humans suffering long-term depression. It can damage our immune systems. Some chronic diseases that have been linked to persistent chronic stress are cardiovascular dysfunctions, diabetes, cancer, autoimmune, mental illness, such as depression and anxiety disorders. And one of the ways that I can see the stress is in this next piece, which is my emotions, which is this roller coaster. That's me. I don't know about you, but I find myself going from times when I feel good, like I've totally got this. I'm actually making positive changes in my life. Seriously, I'm exercising more. I'm meditating. I have this idea that I'm living intentionally now, doing things that I haven't had the time or intention to do, to rapidly switching to fear and anxiety taking over. Exercise goes out the window, meditation goes out the window. That rapidly changes to sadness, that rapidly changes to irritability, and then can cycle back to peace and calm for no reason. And then it starts over again. And then there's the grief, right? It's so tied up in the anxiety that sometimes I can't even call it grief. I can't tell that it's something separate. I'm sad a lot. I'm sad about not being able to celebrate graduation with the social work students this year. I am sad about not being able to meet their families, because that's my favorite part about the entire academic year is graduation, when I get to meet the families of the students that I've been working with. I don't get to do that this year. I am sad because I don't feel safe outside. The grief of not being able to feel safe walking into the grocery store. I'm sad for other people's suffering that I see. And technology, we were just bemoaning it a minute ago, but technology brings that suffering up front and personal in my living room every day. I see so much suffering out there, and my emotions come from this place of uncertainty and persistent stress that I'm under all the time. The last aspect of this situation that I want to talk about around this collective well-being is actually related to the proposed cure. Not cure of the physical piece, but the preventative cure, which is this idea of social isolation. So I'm a social work researcher, and one of the things that interests me is the connection between social vulnerability and sustainability. A colleague, Jillian Dunn, and I, who's a public health professor here, we're working on identifying socially vulnerable areas in Hawaii. And we're mapping these out, trying to identify the most socially vulnerable areas. The reason we're interested in that is related to climate change and disaster. So if a community is highly socially vulnerable, they are less able to respond to disasters, and they're less able to come out of disasters in a really good place. They're less able to move forward following a disaster. So when we look at social vulnerability, what are the factors that make communities more or less vulnerable? There are many. For example, what resources the community has. Do they have good roads? Do they have stores that are located in the community? Do they have mental health professionals? Do they have access to help in emergencies? But many aspects of vulnerability are social. And the most important of those in research so far is social isolation. Communities that have a high number of residents who are socially isolated are more at risk. This makes sense, right? So if there's a tsunami, I'm worrying about my family. So who is helping those who are isolated get to safety? So social vulnerability, social isolation. I look at the primary tool that's being used to prevent the spread of COVID-19 as a potential problem, and that's this idea of social distancing. So let me tell you a little bit about the science around social isolation and what we know there. Basically, I could summarize it and skip the next slide, which is social isolation isn't good for us. They're the end. But I'm an academic, so I can't be quiet. So we're a social species. We need social contact. Even the introverts in here, and I know a few of you because I see your names, you need social contact too. Research shows that patients who are in medical isolation can experience increased symptoms of anxiety and depression, as well as feelings of fear, abandonment, loneliness, and stigmatization. This is because people who are isolated have decreased sensory stimulation. They have limited social support, which is critical to our health. And they have lack of access to their standard coping strategies, such as spiritual practices or exercising outdoors. So social isolation and uncertainty both trigger this sense of being out of control. So no wonder we're all feeling so out of sorts. Social isolation has been linked to many adverse health consequences, similar to the ones around persistent stress, including depression, poor sleep, impaired cognitive functioning. There we're talking about brain fog. So that where you really are having a hard time tracking, having a hard time following people. Other ones that we find: poor cardiovascular functioning and impaired immunity. There was a recent study, 2019, that looked at data from over 500,000 people and found that social isolation increased the risk of premature death from every cause for every race. Among Black participants, for example, social isolation doubled the risk of early death. So when the other poll that we were going to do, I think we should just skip over that plan, is to look at that list of symptoms and having each of you anonymously, that's why I'm not going to ask you to do this verbally right now because I think it's a little bit personal, is to kind of look through that list and see how many of you have the racing heart piece, hard to control worry, sleeplessness, low energy, emotions swinging, brain fog, decreased immunity, feeling like you're sick more than normal, feelings of loneliness, and then FOMO, feeling of missing out. Can a couple of you click on this and just see if, there we go. Yeah, this one's working. Let's do that for a little bit here. Okay. Just another 10 seconds or so. Anyone else want to log in what they're experiencing? Low energy, 100%. That one wins. Okay, so can everyone see the results or is it just me? Or do you have to display them? Do you know? There, now everyone can see. Oh, it tells me that. Attendees are now viewing the poll results. So give you an idea of what everyone's experiencing in terms of these: the sleeplessness, low energy, swinging emotions, brain fog, and here we're expecting you to do online learning, feelings of loneliness. Okay. So let me pull that down. Thanks for listening to my worries. I hope I didn't raise your anxiety level now. That isn't the intention of this. My intent was to normalize more what people are feeling. So to summarize that normalization, the current situation of us sheltering in place is concerning for both our physical and mental well-being because of this idea of uncertainty, persistent stress, and then the effects of social isolation. So there's a lot to be worried about, but there are strategies that we can use that can help to become more resilient. And resilience is having that ability to adapt in the face of adversity. They talk about this frequently as the bouncing ball, that when you hit the ground, you're able to bounce back. So it makes sense right now that we would be looking for things that increase our resilience. And I've organized these ideas of what can increase our resilience is in terms of what we're paying attention to, because I think that's a key piece here is what are we looking at? And I'm suggesting that we pay attention to our thoughts, to our connections, to nature, and to creating routines. So let me run through each of these. First, our thoughts, paying attention to our thoughts. We've talked about two of the patterns of thinking that are problematic, this tendency of our minds to do the catastrophizing and this impact bias, this idea that we overestimate the impact that events are going to have on us, and we overestimate the negative impact, and we underestimate our ability to handle them. So based on those, I'm going to share 5 strategies directed at changing problematic thinking. This is kind of the overview of them. The first strategy is something that I learned from Martin Seligman when I took a workshop from him. And he's one of the founders of the Positive Psychology Center. And his strategy is called Put It in Perspective. It starts by you coming up with the worst case scenario. So thinking of something that worries you and spending some time developing the worst case scenario, put details on it. Then you move to the best case scenario. What's the best thing that could happen? What's the best outcome in these events that Hawaii stays where it's at right now in terms of numbers, that the curve flattens and then it turns around. And then after thinking about both of those, your mind is more able to move toward a likely scenario. And then that's the scenario you spend time fleshing out and doing planning around it. The idea of this strategy is to redirect your thoughts from that irrational realm that we tend to go to more of a rational realm. The second strategy is more of a reminder than a strategy, and it's related to the impact bias piece. You may worry, for example, about losing your job, and whether I've had two students who worked in the restaurant industry and have recently lost their job and gotten unemployment. And so they're worried about whether their restaurant is ever going to recover. It is important to remind yourself regarding the impact bias that we are generally more resilient than we think. When a bad thing actually happens, most of us won't take it as hard as we might have predicted beforehand. We tend to underappreciate our natural tendency to adapt to anything that life throws at us. So it's keeping that in mind when you're faced with adversity like this. Another strategy is to tackle the worrying thoughts by scheduling worry time. Rather than trying to push it out of your head, sometimes the thoughts are so persistent, you simply schedule time to do it. So you take 20 minutes and this is worry time. Some people, worry time is an out loud time that you go outside and act like you're, I don't know, you have an audience and you speak to them. Sometimes people, it's writing time. Sometimes it's sitting in your head. But you put a timer on, 15, 20 minutes, you shut it off. The idea there is that you're dumping it there, and then hopefully it's easier to set it aside. The fourth strategy is pulling in the body, which I mentioned before, this body-mind connection. When we get stuck in our minds worrying, refocus attention on your body. We talked earlier about that connection, and you need to use it. Stress lives in the body. Release then comes from the body. Exercise, meditation, walking, doing a 5 senses scan. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. The idea is, most of you are blanked out, so I can't even tell if you're doing this. So let me just walk you through one right now. If you close your eyes, and when I stop talking, you identify something that you hear. And then something that you see. And then something that you touch, something that you smell, and then what else did I miss? Hear, sight, touch, smell. Somebody jump in. What's the 5th sense? See?
Feel.
Feel. Taste. Taste was the other one. Tasting in your mouth right now. This is a meditative technique used to bring your awareness back into your body out of your head, that we sit in our heads too much. So doing a 5 senses scan is something that they do in treatment for anxiety to get you to redirect out of your head and into your other senses. So it's spending just a little bit of time. You can do it at any time. Just stop thinking and check in with your 5 senses. It's a way to reset. So using your body as a tool, there are a lot of meditative techniques that you can explore. Finally, the last strategy would be about challenging your thoughts and challenging what you're paying attention to. You see people hoarding toilet paper, for example, and not thinking about other people. You see photos of those spring breakers down in Florida with hundreds who are ignoring the quarantine, and you think we're never going to get ahead of this. You see leaders who may seem like they don't have a clue what's going on, and you think we're totally screwed. You need to challenge those thoughts with the people who are helping. This is that Jim Neighbors technique. reminding us that when things go bad, look around for those who are helping. There are always people who are helping. Our mind focuses in on those who are not, and yet the majority are helping. So there are smart people right now dedicating everything they have to solving this problem. That's where you focus your thoughts, that you stop focusing on necessarily challenge, not stop, but challenge the thoughts that you're only focusing on the negative. One thing that I just recently saw, John Krasinski, I don't know how many of you have seen it, started this SGN, it's Some Good News, and it's a little video clip that he's doing from his home. And if you haven't seen it, I encourage you, write it down and watch it. It's a great example of changing your attention to positive things that are happening. If you sit in front of the news, watching the craziness, the negatives, why wouldn't you worry? You're telling your brain to pay attention to that. That's not the whole picture right now. So what else is happening that gives you hope, laughter, connection? Those are the things to attend to. So challenge those. The next strategy I want to mention is routine. And this is just an example of a schedule. So I think in the corner it says go to church. So it's obviously not a schedule that fits with where we're at right now. All of us have started some new routines, using less toilet paper and hand washing, hopefully in that order, to help overcome uncertainty. Normality and routines that mirror life's patterns can be helpful. Here, I don't think you can do it because I don't think it was the first poll. I think it only lets you do that first poll. But I was having you rate yourself on a continuum. 1 being someone who likes everything structured and routine, and then 10 being someone who wants everything to be spontaneous, that there's no planning involved, and that most of us tend to kind of be on that continuum for our preferred state in terms of structure and spontaneity. So all of you know where you are on that. And all of you more spontaneous people, I'm sorry, but in times of extreme stress, you're going to need to find a way to go down on that scale a little bit. Routine is important right now. It's like sex. People always say that they want sex to be spontaneous all the time. That's what they want all the time. That's the kind of sex they want. Spur of the moment, unplanned, exciting. But when you ask couples who've been together for a while, sexual satisfaction goes up when sex is planned. It decreases anxiety around sex and removes an area of potential conflict. This is one of the #1 strategies recommended during crisis and disasters, is to go back to routine as quickly as possible, that we find comfort in routine. So I'm going to bring your body back in. Pay attention to your body when you're planning your routine. Stress lives in the body. So your routine should involve taking care of your body. 8 hours of sleep, eating well, exercising even though you might hate it. Minimize the news, schedule alternatives to the news. And then in terms of routine, monitor your avoidance behaviors. And I think you all know what I'm talking about. Each of us has these: increased alcohol, drug use, 8 hours of binge watching something on Netflix. The problem with these short-term strategies is that they work. We can be distracted from stress. The problem is they don't last. The problem is that the problem comes back and we have done nothing to adapt to the problem. So monitor your avoidance behaviors right now. Develop coping strategies that bring you into the present. And a routine and a schedule can do that. It lets you live right now and not in the future. We'll talk about that in a second too. So your challenge during this time is to keep your physical distance, but stay connected. That's the challenge. I told you that social isolation is troubling. And so you need to stay physically distant and more connected than ever. The picture right here is of my son, my daughter-in-law, and my 2 grandkids, Mia and Kalia. And thankfully, they just moved here a year ago. So I happen to have them close to me. And the challenge is for me to figure out how to be connected and increase my connection to them. Our desire to connect to others, I think, is our biggest strength as a species. That's why I'm in social work. That's what drew me to this profession, is this desire to use our social nature to improve all of our well-being. So your resilience challenge is to figure out how to increase your social connections right now. How do you remain in the present moment, not worrying about the future, not overthinking the past, living in the moment, increasing your connections and bonds? To increase your bonds, you need to be deliberate about your use of social media. I don't need to tell any of you that social media is an invaluable resource right now. Technology is an invaluable resource right now. I'm video presenting right now because of technology. But I also don't need to tell you that it has potential consequences that can increase feelings of social distance and isolation. I was scrolling through Instagram the other day and came across Demi Moore and Bruce Willis. And here's this divorced couple with their adult children. They're all isolating together. I don't know, six of them, I think. And they're just doing these amazing things. They're posting videos of them doing singing together. And of course, they all have beautiful voices. They're doing little acting things together. It looks just wonderful. And it makes me feel warm when I first view it. However, quickly, there's a tinge of something else. The tinge of, that's not been my experience right now. I'm not enjoying this as much as they seem to be enjoying this. And that's one of the ways that social media can make us feel distant from each other and not connected to each other. It makes us feel different then. So finding social media as a way that brings us together, there are many ways it's doing that. I see people doing virtual cooking sessions together, joint happy hours together. Here I go back to the alcohol again. Maybe they're doing non-alcoholic drinks. Watching movies together. Netflix has that capacity right now. Doing virtual dinners together. Students having study sessions together to help get over that brain fog that people are experiencing. Who are your people? And who have you lost touch with? Who might benefit from contact from you? We actually feel better when we're helping others. One more piece I want to talk about was connection before we move on, and that's oxytocin. So there's a stress response that happens that relates to social connection. When our levels of stress rise, our bodies release more oxytocin. And you may recall that oxytocin is called the love hormone. It's the hormone that's released when we cuddle, when we fall in love, when we form social bonds. So it's interesting. Most of you know the hormone that gets released during stress as adrenaline. That's the primary one that people understand. There's a surge of adrenaline. There's a surge of oxytocin during persistent stress. And it makes perfect sense. So we're talking evolutionarily. Let's fight the threat as a pack. It makes you want to be together and join with others. And right now that makes sense too. Let's fight this threat by building our community. This is the time to harness our instincts to be compassionate to others. But we have to do it in a different way than we have. So we're not able to give hugs. We're not able to shake hands. I had a friend who passed away the other day, and the funeral yesterday was on Facebook. It was a surreal experience having a funeral of someone one was very close to on Facebook. So we're having to do these events differently, but it's important to find ways to do that connection. In fact, the act of sheltering in place is an act of helping others. And when you reflect on that choice that you're making to do that, it gives you control over the spread of virus. You're doing it in order to help others. That increases those community bonds. So then I want to talk about that last strategy, connecting with nature. And talking a little bit about hypnosis. I actually used to do hypnosis. I haven't done that for many years. And one of the strategies to get someone into a hypnotic state is to have them imagine a calm place. And they take a few minutes, imagine the calm place, and then tell the therapist who's leading them into the hypnosis what that place is, giving a lot of details. And what people find is that most of those places are nature. They're connected to nature, that for many of us, not all, Nature is a place of calm and peace. And that makes sense for hypnosis. We want you, in order to go into a trance, to be in a place of calm. Most people experience that with nature. As I mentioned before, my primary research right now is around that intersection of social work and sustainability. So of course, I'm going to talk about the importance of nature and connecting to the physical, natural environment. Spending time in nature restores us. It helps to decrease stress and recover from stress. Quick science, studies show that after feeling stress, being out in nature can reduce the effects of it. It lowers your heart rate, it decreases muscle tension, it lowers blood pressure. It alleviates feelings of social isolation. As people report stronger feelings of connectedness with their community after they're out in nature. So I just want to repeat that because I think it is so profound. Nature alleviates feelings of social isolation. People report stronger feelings of being connected to their community when they're out in nature, even if they don't see a single soul. That it promotes a feeling of connection to the world. It can be challenging right now to find a way to be outside, but health officials are actually encouraging people to continue to be outside because we know the health benefits of it while keeping that distance piece. So hiking, walking their dogs, running with distance, maintaining that 6 feet. When you're walking in nature, there's greater emotional, cognitive, and physiological benefits following stress compared to those who walk in urban environments. So it's not just the exercise part that helps with it. It's the being out in nature part. It's one of the blessings of being here in this state. So being in nature has restorative properties. It enhances our senses. It cultivates positive emotions, and it gives us experiences of tranquility. Being in nature helps us focus on the present, the right now. So related to that, let me pull all of these strategies together. Anxiety is worrying about the future. Some of you may have the pictures of all of us on the far right-hand corner. I don't know if right works on right where you're seeing, but that's a scary image of the future. Depression, many people characterize depression as worrying about the past. So the middle is the present. As much as possible, the strategies you employ are about how do you be in the present, in this moment, grounded in the present. That's how you improve your well-being and the well-being of those around you. So finally, before I open this up to others, is I want to mention that it's important for us to know when to ask for help, because there is help out there. This particular combination of factors that is happening right now is a very negative mix for some people. I've said it's bad for all of us. It's really bad for some people. What's happening right now can re-trigger depression. It can re-trigger grief in those who've experienced losses. It can increase anxiety for those already dealing with anxiety disorders. It can increase depression. It can increase mental health problems. So I'm saying that right now to two different groups of people. Those of you right now who know you're at increased risk because you've experienced those things, and those of you who know someone who is. There are many sources of help right now. Technology is actually an incredible benefit right now. For those of you who might have a friend who's in that situation, has experienced grief, has experienced depression, has anxiety disorders, and you're worried about them, check in with them frequently. Check on your friends and others in your community. Let them know you're thinking of them. Over-checking right now is better than under-checking. And for those of you that are experiencing it yourselves, here are some of the resources that are available. One thing that is very available right now is telehealth, more available than it's ever been before in the United States. So meeting with people through what we're doing right now, through video conferencing. There are 24-hour helplines available to you. There are 24-hour text crisis lines if you're not comfortable actually talking to someone. You can set up video conferencing sessions with the HPU behavioral health team. That's their email address right there. They can typically get back to you and schedule appointments within a week. Even if you simply need someone to talk to, that's what they're there for. It's one of those things, you're paying for the service anyway out of your student fees. So it's one of the few times you have free counseling available to you, so take it. That's where you email. When you email them, they want you to leave your first and last name and simply your contact information, either email or phone number, and they'll get back to you. The Hawaii Crisis Access Line, I also put that on there for after hours emergency. And then one of the fascinating things that's happening right now is all of these online support communities that are sprouting up. NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mentally Ill, has always had online support communities. They're very active right now. Go to their webpage. There's support groups that are active. You can find them on this support group central. AA and NA have online support groups right now. If you've been someone who's been interested in looking at your alcohol use, this may be a time that you pursue that. If it's too much for you right now to explore these, then ask a friend to do it for you. If you have a friend you're worried about, explore some of these resources for them. So remember that first slide that we talked about uncertainty? We're in a place right now that none of us likely has been in before. Our parents haven't been in this place before. Our grandparents haven't been in this place before. And so we can't look to someone and say, so what do we do? We are simply in this together, all of us. And we get through this by supporting each other. So those are the thoughts that I had that I wanted to share. I just want to open it up right now and see what thoughts and questions, suggestions that other people might have. Please jump in.
Hi, Michaela. This is Emily.
Hi.
I would put on my video, but you know, I've been working from home all day and I'm a mess.
Oh, well.
I just wanted to say thank you because you made everything I've been feeling super normal. So thank you.
Well, good. You're welcome. Anyone else? Any other thoughts, strategies that you have that I didn't mention?
Hi, Dr. Rinkel, it's Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Yeah, something, I guess, I don't know if it pertains or not, but for me, it's kind of guilt, I guess, because I feel bad because, you know, school started for the middle school yesterday. So that is like a total relief for me. So I feel bad about it, but it's online for them. So it's extremely tough for my daughter. But I feel bad for that. But then it's also guilt because envy for, I guess, those that are alone or living by themselves, because even though they're probably experiencing a lot of loneliness and, you know, envy towards those that have family or with families right now, whereas for me it's the other way around, because everything is so overwhelming and overpowering that it just feels like sometimes if I could just be alone, you know, but I know everybody's going through the same thing, so kind of just, I don't know, maybe guilt.
Right. That's that comparative guilt that we do, that somehow you know, whatever, like some people feeling bad because we're not going to have graduation, and then chastising themselves. Oh, what a silly thing to be upset about. There's people who whose loved one is dying away and they can't be with them in the ICU. Those are things that we really need to be worried about. But the challenge to that then is that it's as if we have this idea that empathy has a set limit, and it doesn't. When we have empathy for ourselves and let ourselves feel something, and just simply that I'm feeling bad about this is catastrophic for me, that actually builds our empathy for other people. and increases our ability to connect. If we push those down and say, no, this isn't worth being upset about, snap out of it, buck up, then it actually makes us less empathic for other people. So it's not, it's this idea that there's a limit on the amount of empathy we can have, and that is not true. Empathy comes from self, that allowing ourselves to be, yes, this sucks. Yes, I am sad. I am grieving about whatever, and it may be small for someone else. That allows us to be available for grief for someone else. So that, I feel the same way. I struggle with that thought frequently of, I'll feel something and then it's like, oh, come on. You look at the news and, oh my gosh, look at all that. That's happening. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or suggestions that anyone has? Okay. Well, great. I appreciate everyone taking the time today to participate and giving me a chance to just put some of these things out there. I'm going to say, be safe, everyone, and stay well and take care of each other. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.